those that were here yesterday, you will have heard that this series of lectures is based on my upcoming book, and the fundamental framework of the book is the peace system, the peace framework. Peace stands for positive thinking, which is the power to shape our destiny, and that's going to be the topic of today. Tomorrow we're going to look at embracing challenge when things go wrong and how we're supposed to deal with that. Then we're going to speak about appreciation or gratitude, then certainty, bitachon or trust, and then the final E stands for empathy. So as I said, today we're going to be focusing on the P, which stands for positive thinking. So I'm going to tell you a story. When I was a rabbi in Montreal, Canada, I had a shul, and my seat at the shul was in the front of the shul. So I would sit in the front, and I would face the entire congregation. So everybody was looking at me, and I would face out to the congregation, and there were two gentlemen that sat next to each other. One of them was a Holocaust survivor. I'll call him Mr. E. And he was the most beautiful human being. He became a very close friend of mine. And he always had a smile on his face. I'll tell you something really amazing. I described him to ChatGPT. And then I said ChatGPT should do a picture of him. And it drew this. And I wish I had a picture and I could show you. This is exactly what he looked like. It's unbelievable. I don't know how it got it right. That's Mr. E over there. And he always had that smile. That smile that you see over there, that was the smile that was constantly on his face. He had a beautiful family. He was so loving towards his family. And everything was always good. You asked him how he was. It was always amazing. Baruch Hashem. Everything was great. And he was really a beautiful, beautiful soul, a beautiful human being. Next to him, there was another man, I'll call him Mr. B. And I described him to ChatGPT, and it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable how close this person looks exactly like Mr. B. Unbelievable. It's mind-boggling. I don't know how it got there. That doesn't make any sense. But anyway, Mr. B was born they're about the same age. He was born in Canada. And everybody tells me he had a really good upbringing, kind of upper middle class family. He became an accountant. He went to university, became an accountant. He started a practice. The practice thrived. He did very well. Also has a tremendous family. His children are amazing, each one accomplished, full of nachas. He has a wife that dotes on him. I mean, he really lived the most amazing life. Like, I mean, obviously not, but it would seem the circumstances of his life were very beautiful. And yet, he was so negative. Oh my goodness, this guy was a cynic. I never said a sermon that he liked. Not even one. I mean, sometimes you got to hit one of them out of the park. No, everything was terrible. It was too long. It was too short. It was too complex. It was too simple. Nothing ever was good enough for him, Mr. B. And so there I was, sitting in my shul, looking out at the Kehillah, at the congregation, and seeing these two men. They sat like third row from the front, very hard to miss. And I looked at them, the one with his beautiful smile, the other one with his scowl, his permanent scowl. And I went home and I told my wife one Shabbos, I remember I came home and I said, you got to make sure I never end up like Mr. B. As I age, I don't want to be that That you know what? She always reminds me, if I'm like in a bad mood or something, she'll say, Mr. B. And I'm like, okay, fine. I'll get it. She was on, I was onto something, because there's a number of scientific studies that show that people who have a positive outlook have tremendous advantages. Hold on one second. I'm just going to change a setting over here. Okay. They live longer. People who are generally positive live longer than people who are scholars. They experience less depression. They reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease, Yenamachla, stroke, all sorts of terrible diseases. They have lower occurrences of those diseases. They're better able to cope when they have hardships. They have greater resistance to the common cold. So just being positive makes you less likely to get sick. They're more creative, and they have better relationships, because everyone likes to be around positive people. So they enjoy better relationships. And these are all scientifically, they've studied people who are positive, negative, and over time, they found that if you have a positive outlook on life, all these things are true. Now, there's Alameda, which is a place in Alameda County in California. They did a study in 1965. What's that? They did a study in 1965, and it involved over 6,000 participants, so it was a fairly large study. And they found that positive thinking was linked to lower mortality rates and chronic disease, like we saw before in those other studies, strengthened their immune system, like we saw in the other studies, better mental health, and higher quality of life in people who were objectively more unhealthy. So if you looked at the data, you looked at the tests, the medical tests, these people were objectively more unhealthy. But because they were positive, they had the benefit of all of these things. And it was, as I said, over 6,000 people, and they followed them for a couple of decades, for about 20 years. And that's what they found. So quite amazing, the power that our mind has. Another very interesting study was they put these people in a room, and they gave them a button that they had to press when they heard a sound. So the sound would play, there was like a bell, and they would have to press the button, and they timed their reaction time. And they told, so the first group of people, they said, just hit that bell as fast as you can. And they timed how fast it was to hit the bell. The second group, they said, imagine that you were an ace fighter pilot. You had reactions that are far superior to most human beings. And they got them into a state where they could imagine as if they were that fighter pilot. And they had trained and honed their response skills, their twitch muscles. And they had them meditate on this for a while. And then they tested them. And of course, you would probably guess that these people were much faster at hitting that button when they heard the sound than the group that were not primed in this way. So just thinking that you're fast, that you have good reactions, was enough to actually give you an edge and to make you react faster. Again, the ability of the mind to impact every part of our body, our health, our mental health, our physical health, our reaction times. There's a Zohar, which the Rebbe quoted a number of times. I know that the Rebbe quoted it to somebody in Yechidus once as well. And the Zohar says something really interesting. So it's kind of putting a spiritual spin on everything I've been saying so far. The Zohar says that in heaven, they react and they mirror our behavior here on earth, our state, our emotional states on earth. So when we are happy and we are in a positive mindset, from heaven, bracha, blessing, gushes down. And if God forbid, we are not happy, we're not positive, we're not looking at the world in a positive way, it chases away blessing. It's a very, very powerful piece of the Zohar. And it obviously makes one think that there's a lot of advantages to being positive. Reb Moshe Leib of Sasov, he said something really interesting. He said, it is true that the heavenly gates are opened with tears. So, right, tears are very powerful. And if the heavenly gates are closed, you can't open them with tears. But he said, joy is way stronger than crying. Joy demolishes all barriers and removes all hurdles. Where there is joy, there are no gates. And so it's a similar thing to what the Zohar is saying, that our joy can actually, just the state of being happy creates the reality that we are happy. So psychologists speak of an external locus of control and an internal locus of control. The explanation of what it means to be an external locus of control means that a person feels that they have no control of their life, that everything happens to them, right? So they are just always the victim of circumstances. So things that a person who has this mindset would say are success is mostly determined by external factors outside of my control. They would say my life is largely determined by chance, by circumstances beyond my control. I never seem to catch a break, no matter what I do. I'm not capable of overcoming certain obstacles or challenges. I often second guess myself and doubt my decisions. No matter how hard I work, luck always seems to play a role. There's not much I can do to change my situation, etc., etc. These are all internal dialogues that a person who has an external locus of control would have. Now, if you have an internal locus of control, you're pretty much saying all the opposite messages to yourself. You're saying, I can make a difference if in a situation if I put in the effort. You're saying, I'm responsible for my success and my happiness. I can handle whatever life throws at us. And so this is a very well written about, very well studied concept to having an external locus of control and an internal locus of control. And I was trying to think, like, what would Torah say about this? What would Chassidus say about this? So obviously, as we've been learning in the morning, bitachon is having trust in Hashem is a very humbling, it's humbling. In a way, you're realizing that nothing is coming from you. It's all coming from Hashem. But I don't think that it's so clear-cut that Chassidus and Torah would reject an internal locus of control. I think that there's quite a lot, and in the peace system, when we get to the letter C, towards the end of our journey together, we're going to dive a little bit more deeper into this question of how much certainty and confidence we should have within ourselves and still have bitachon that every success and everything that is happening in our lives is coming from Hashem. So more to come on that later. I just want to start planting the seeds and start the discussion about external, internal locus of control. The next thing I want to talk about is something called the brain security guard, also known as the reticular activating system, or the RAS. So first of all, let me show you this. This is a guess that scientists have about how many bits of information our brain receives every second, right? So we have various parts of our body. We have eyes and ears and sensory, we can touch things. And all of these senses that humans have, and by the way, there's a lot more than 5, according to scientists, all of our senses are constantly bringing information into a person's brain. I'm talking, your ears are hearing, and bringing that information into your brain, hopefully. So this means that a person has about 11 million bits of information bombarding their brain every single second that you're awake in the day. That's a lot of information. It's an overwhelming amount of information. And it overwhelms the brain to the point that it would be impossible for the brain to function and operate and keep, if it was paying attention to 11 million bits of information every second. So Baruch Hashem, thankfully Hashem placed in our brains a bouncer. So imagine like a popular nightclub, and you have a bouncer outside who only lets certain people in, only the beautiful people, not. So he stands there, and that's his function. His function is primarily not meant to let people in. His function is to keep people out. The reticular activating system is a small piece of our brains, about the size of a pencil eraser, and it sits somewhere really in the middle, inside of the brain. And its job is to make sure that not everyone gets into the party. Not 11 million people try and crash this party. And the reticular activating system says, stop. We're not going to let 11 million in. We're going to let in a lot smaller number. Now, the reticular activating system I'll show you it at work. I'm sure you've experienced the following scenario. Let's say you're at a party. You're at a simcha. And a couple hundred people at the simcha. They're in a big hall. And everybody's standing around and talking. They haven't been seated yet. And you're sitting with a group of 3 people. So there's you and 2 other people. And what are you talking about? Fascinating subject. You're talking about the weather. Right? Now, it's quite fascinating. I came here on, Tuesday morning. And then I was like, you guys brought me here under false pretexts. I thought it was summer, right? And then they said, okay, it's Melbourne, wait 15 minutes, you'll get the weather you want. So I had a few interesting discussions actually about the weather. I had more interesting discussions about other topics. We discussed the weather. So there you are at the simcha, and some guys inveighing about the weather. It's too cold, it's too hot, it's whatever they're saying about the weather. Both if it was Melbourne. And then somebody at the far end of the hall says your name. Now, you were not listening. You were not consciously aware of the conversation that was happening at the other side of the hall. You didn't hear that. But the minute they said your name, you immediately focused on that conversation. Has this ever happened to you? Yeah? What happened? The RAS, the reticular activating system, was making sure that there would be that it was keeping out all the information, but it is primed to let certain information in immediately. And one of the pieces of information that it will always let in is your name. And that's why when somebody mentioned your name in the far corner of the room, you instantly, the RAS said, oh, this is something really interesting, we have to focus on this, boom. And you hear the name. If there's danger, if something explodes in front of you, the RAS will let that in too. But here's the cool thing. You can actually train the RAS. You can train it what you want it to let in. So I don't know if you've ever had the following experience. Let's say you buy yourself a blue Tesla. Every time you drive that blue Tesla, I guarantee you'll see another blue Tesla in the road. Even though you never saw a blue Tesla before, you thought you were being pretty unique getting a blue Tesla, right? And that's because your RAS was primed and trained not to let in blue Teslas. But when you bought a blue Tesla, it suddenly started noticing that because it became important for you. And what's important, the Raz will let in. Your name is the most important word in the English language. That's why it lets it in all the time. So I once went to Tony Robbins' seminar in Toronto. And Tony asked it was an intimate crowd, about close to 20,000 people. Small little crowd, us and Tony. I was one of the people there. And he says, everybody, he wants to test our memory. So he asks us to look around the room and to take note of anything that is green. So we all look around the room and we're all looking for green, okay, green. I say, oh yeah, that's green. Right? We're looking again. And then he says he's going to tell us to close our eyes. And he wants to see how many objects in the room that are green that we saw that we could remember with our eyes closed. Okay, sounds pretty good. I was down. He hypes everybody up, so you're really into it. And I go, okay, green, that lady's scarf. And I had like my list, and I wanted to, I'm very competitive. I wanted to do really well. I wanted to get a lot of things. So then he says, okay, now close your eyes, and tell me everything that you saw that was red. I could not think of a single thing, not even a one. And then he says, now open your eyes and look around the room and see how much red there is. And everywhere there was red. It was a sea of red. Everywhere you looked, there was red. But the Raz was primed to only look at green, not at red. And because the Raz was primed to let in only green things, it did that. And we know nobody saw the red. You just didn't see any red. So what's so amazing about this is it means that you can literally prime your Raz to see positivity. And then when you do it, when you prime your reticular activating system to see the blessings in your life, not to focus on the negativity, but to see the blessings and the positivity in your life, the Raz will actually start letting more positivity, which is a virtuous spiral, a virtuous loop, because you'll have more positivity, and the more positivity will make you notice more positivity, and then you'll see more positivity, so it'll make you more positive, and that will make you notice more, and so it will go. So you can actually, even if you're Mr. B there, that cynic, sitting in the third row of the Zichron Kedoshim synagogue, he could change if you would just listen to those drushes when I spoke about being positive. He could have actually transformed himself. And we can all transform ourselves. We can all do that. And there's always room for improvement. Can I have a volunteer who's a fast reader? I need somebody who could read something very fast. Does anyone want to? I'm going to flash something on the screen, and I want somebody to read very fast. Anybody? No volunteers? Anyone? In North America, I would have to okay, let me see. But Australia, people are very shy. No? Nobody want to read? You don't trust me? You don't have bitachon? What's it? Thank you. Okay. Read it loud so that everybody could hear, and read it fast. So I want you to read it very fast. We're going to do something really cool.
Change the way you look at things, and the things you look at will change.
Correct. She's wrong, right? You all know that. She didn't read that correctly, right? Did she read it correctly? Yeah. Did she? What? Very good. Look, it actually says, change the way change the way you look at things, and the things you look at will change. You didn't see that because your brain was not primed to see that. Your brain would just jump around, see a few words, and don't worry, nobody ever gets that right. Don't feel bad. The Zohar says something really interesting, which I think the Zohar says something really interesting, which is definitely backs up what I've been saying all along. Probably it's the source of it. And it's like this. This word over there, I'll read it, don't worry. I'm a trained professional, don't try this at home. This word means besimcha. This word besimcha means joy, means happiness, contentment. Simcha, everybody knows what simcha means. So look what the Zohar says. Look at the letters on the slide and watch how they change. I'm going to change the order of the letters. The Zohar does this. It changes the order of the letters besimcha. Look what they spell out. The word machshava. The word machshava means thought or contemplation. So what does machshava mean? What does this mean? That the Zohar is telling us that the word machshava and the word besimcha are the exact same letters. There's besimcha. So you see it's the exact same letters, different order, different vowels, but the exact same letters. The Zohar says this because the way that we have simcha is through our thoughts, right? In other words, if you have positive thoughts, as I've been saying, that will create a positive mood. You'll be generally living besimcha, a life of joy and contentment. It starts from the head, machshava. Now, do you think that the world thinks the same? This is the Zohar, right? So we know that this is right. That our simcha is dependent on our thoughts. If we have the right thoughts, happy thoughts, then we have simcha. Now, let me ask you this question. Do you think that the world thinks like this? That our simcha is dependent on our thoughts?
No.
No. I don't think the world in general thinks like this. And I'll use language to try and prove it. So here's the language the word happy in English, right? Which is simcha, happy. It's similar, etymologically related to these four words. Happenstance, do you know what happenstance means? It means a chance happening. Something that's the luck of the draw. Haphazard means characterized by randomness. Hapless means unlucky. It's not a word most people use, but if you were Shakespeare, you would know what that meant. Hap means luck in Shakespearean English. So it's interesting that all the words related to the word happy in English are related to luck. Because the world thinks that to be happy, you have to be born in the right family, you have to win the lottery, you have to have the right genes, you have to have the right education, born in the right place, the circumstances of your life. So the world very much thinks that happiness is a function of randomness, of absolute random luck. The hand you were dealt, the cards you were dealt. If you were dealt good cards, you're going to crush it. You're going to be amazing. And if not, there's nothing you can do. What does this sound like? A little bit like the internal locus of control, right? Sorry, the external locus of control, where the person is a victim of their circumstances, not that they're creating their own destiny. And machshava and simcha, that parallel, sounds like an external locus of control. Sounds like the person who's able to say, I can change my state. Not because the circumstances are changing. I have no control over those, or very little. But I can change how I react to those circumstances. I can see it as life happening for me and not to me. So, to quote a great philosopher, me, happiness is an action, not a reaction. Right? And I think the machshava besimcha parallel means that happiness is an action, not a reaction. It's not that you need the circumstances to be ideal before you can be positive, before you can be happy. You create that positivity and happiness regardless of what the circumstances are, because your happiness is not a reaction. That's the English world thinks it's a reaction. But in Hebrew, Your happiness is not a reaction to the world. Lashon HaKodesh. So if we go back to my peace framework for a moment again, all of these 5 steps, they actually have a common denominator. And the common denominator is that Hashem gives us agency, which means that both in terms of positive, we've seen the Simcha Machshava connection, that we can look positively at the world. We will learn tomorrow about embracing challenging moments and reframing those challenging moments. Again, that we don't become victims of those challenging moments, but we reframe them. Then on Sunday, Mitzvah Hashem, we'll learn about gratitude and how powerful gratitude is, to see that and to focus your Raz on all the things that are going on in your life, which are positive and beautiful and blessings, rather than focusing on the negative. When we speak about bitochen, trust, and that Hashem gives us everything we need to succeed in the ways to fulfill our purpose and our mission in this world, we'll see again that there's agency there. And finally, when we speak about empathy, about giving other people and serving other people, we'll see how that is the greatest agency, that we can actually impact and affect the world and make the world a better place. And in fact, that's why, in many cases, Hashem created difficult circumstances so that we can go and repair what has been broken. We can heal what has been broken and impact and change the world. So we'll see that the entire framework actually has, as an underlying theme, this concept. There's an amazing medrash, and the medrash says that a person that when Hashem created trees, and then Hashem created metal. When Hashem created metal, iron, the trees came to Hashem and they protested. They had a protest. You know what a protest is, right? So they come to Hashem and they are really mad. What do they say to Hashem? They say, now we're done for. We're going to be destroyed. Why? Because you created iron, and iron is sharp enough, it will create axes, and axes will destroy us. So listen to what the Medrash says, that Hashem responded. Hashem said, foolish trees, if you don't give the handle to the metal, there would be no axe. You have to let circumstances destroy you. You know, pain is inevitable. It's a part of the human condition. Some people are blessed that they have less pain. Some people, unfortunately, suffer more pain. There's nothing we can do. It's part of the human condition. People experience pain. Suffering is a choice. You can decide that you're going to dwell in that pain. You could give that pain a handle and let it chop you down. You could be like Mr. B, or you could be like Mr. E. And you could say to yourself, Mr. E suffered pain that we cannot imagine, fathom, beyond any imagination. A little bit he spoke about, he mostly focused on positive, but every now and then he would tell me a story about when he was in the camps. And horrific pain that he never suffered. At least he never showed it. He made a decision. He made a decision that he was going to live a happy life. He made a decision that his machshava, that his thoughts were going to be besimcha. He made a decision that the past was the past, and now he's going to focus on the present and the future, and he raised an amazing family, and he had many friends, and he had an admirer in me and many, many other people, because he would not give the handle to the axe. He would not allow the circumstances of his past to take away his positivity in the now. And that's what I asked my wife, to make sure that I should be a little bit like him. Because you can, and you should.
No one can do it for someone else.
No one can do it for someone else. It has to come from you. Yeah, that's true. They can remind you not to be grumpy. So now I'm going to switch gears a little bit and speak about the famous saying, I hope it's famous amongst everybody here. Tracht gut wird sein gut, in Yiddish, think good, and it will be good. So I'll tell you there's a very interesting letter that the Frierdiker Rebbe writes to a father. So let me tell you a little bit about this letter, and then and that will be our introduction to Trachgut V'Zaingut. This father, so it must have been in the 40s, in the 1940s, before 1950, and a father had a son who went on an airplane. And in the 1950s, airplanes look like that. Hopefully minus the smoke, but I'm thinking. And the airplane went missing. And they could not find the airplane, and they did not know what the fate of the passengers of that airplane were. So the father writes a desperate letter, one could imagine, to the Frierdiker Rebbe. And he asks the Rebbe, I guess, for a bracha. And the Rebbe's response, the Frierdiker Rebbe's response, is that he answers the person and he tells the person a story that happened with the Frierdiker Rebbe's great-grandfather, the Tzemach Tzedek. And he says that a chassid of the Tzemach Tzedek, Reb Michal Berliner, had a son. And that son also was in a very horrible situation. He was deathly ill. He was lying in his bed, deathly ill. And the doctors, they didn't have much that they could do in those days for a person that was suffering with the illness that this child had. And the doctors gave up hope. And they said, we are so sorry to tell you, but we'll try and make your son comfortable. He's not going to be long in this world. So it's interesting that Reb Michal Berliner left his son's bedside. That in itself, it's not often spoken about, but I've thought about it. That must have been a hard decision. If you think that your son has only moments left in this world, your child has only moments left in this world, to leave the bedside of your child and travel to the Rebbe. But of course, a chassid does that, and he travels to the Tzemach Tzedek, his Rebbe. And he tells the Tzemach Tzedek about the prognosis of his child, and the Tzemach Tzedek tells him. Now, you might think that the Tzemach Tzedek told him, say Tehillim, give tzedakah. In the merit that your child, the Gemara says this, if you give tzedakah, that your child should be healed. Give tzedakah. Or do some other mitzvah that generates schusim, merit. And then when you have those schusim, that will help your son get better. But the Tzemach Tzedek doesn't say any of that. The Tzemach Tzedek just says, change your mindset. He says, tracht gut. Have positive thoughts. Thoughts that your son will get well. Be certain that he will get well. And that what will happen. In other words, the mechanism to make your son well is just to think that your son is already well. Remember, he is, I don't know how far he was geographically from where his son was, but it's not, I think, unreasonable to say that it was many days' journey to get back to his son. And he comes and he says, so he thinks good and positive, and then I guess he goes back thinking positive, thinking he's going to see his son, running out of the bed, coming and giving him a hug. And that's exactly what happens. When he gets back, the doctors are flabbergasted. Everybody is like, wow, some miracle happened here. And the miracle was precipitated through that positive thinking. So the Frierdiker Rebbe told this man whose son had gone missing that he should follow the advice of the Tzemach Tzedek, and he should trach gut vet gut, he should think positively, and that will bring about the positive reconciliation of his son. Now, I Googled for a long time to try and see, airplane crashes in the 1940s, and did they find people? I don't know. I would love to know what the end of the story is. I'm sure the end of the story is that the son was found and restored to his father. It has to be. That's what the Frierdiker Rebbe said. So anyway, if anybody knows any background, who the story occurred with or whatever, I would be delighted to hear. I'm going to share with you, we're going to learn a little bit of Gemara together. You ready to learn some Gemara? All right, let's do it. This is going to be the most incredible Gemara that you've heard this entire hour, for sure. The Gemara is a Gemara in Hurriya, Daf Yud Beis Amud Aleph. The Gemara says as follows. There's a custom, not a custom like a minhag, but people have this behavior that before they go on a trip, now remember we're talking about the Talmudic times, going on a trip in Talmudic times was not so easy. They didn't have premium economy and they didn't have business class. You had to walk on your 2 feet. It was hard and it was dangerous. So this person, whenever somebody would travel in Talmudic times, when people would travel, they would do a test to see, similar to how we look at our smartphones to see if the plane's leaving on time. They would do a test to see if they would return alive from their trip, right? They didn't do it on a smartphone. There wasn't an app for that in those days. What they did is they went into a dark room. And the Gemara says that if they would see the shadow of their shadow, what's the shadow of a shadow? You know, if you see a shadow, sometimes you see there's like the dark shadow. There's the shadow that has the most intense part of the shadow, and then there's like a little lighter part of the shadow, right? The shadow of the shadow. By the way, the Gemara calls it by its Aramaic name, babua, but a shadow in Hebrew is, one of the words for shadow is tzel, and also tzel means protection. So I think this is where it came from. It came from, the Maharsha says that it came from the fact that people felt protected if they saw their shadow, because that was an omen that Hashem would protect them as they went on this dangerous journey. So the Gemara says, Lav milsahi. It's nonsense. The whole thing's nonsense. It has no basis in anything that is, it's not effective. It's not an effective, it gets 1 star on the app store. Nobody's going to use the app because it's a totally inaccurate predictor of whether your journey is going to be a safe journey or not. Okay, so it seems pretty harmless. But the Gemara says, although it is ineffective, entirely ineffective, the Gemara says, don't do it. Don't do it. Why? Because if a person did it and they didn't see their double shadow, they would worry. They would be concerned. Uh-oh, am I going to return alive or not? And the worry itself, the Gemara says, will bring about the negative outcome. Isn't that amazing? That's the opposite of trachla. That's trach schlecht, anything bad. But we know that in Torah there's always a preponderance. If something is true in the negative, it's certainly much more true in the positive. There's a higher ratio of how true it is in the positive. So that means that if the same Gemara is a source, one of the many sources in the Gemara for trachlut v'tzayngut, because if you see your double shadow and that makes you confident, the confidence itself could be the reason why Hashem allows you to come back safely.
Yeah.
Roadrunner. Have you ever seen, I don't know, was it just my childhood or is anyone old enough? You don't have to say if you are, but if anyone is old enough to remember the Roadrunner cartoon. So what's Wile E. Coyote keeps chasing the Roadrunner? Yeah. And so the Roadrunner is like running, and then he runs off a cliff and he keeps running and he's going fine. Like he's running off a cliff. This is cartoon physics. You see, you run off the cliff and then he looks down on this side, looks back to see where the cliff is, realizes that the cliff's all the way there, and then he sinks, right? He falls down into the valley, right? So how does that work? Till he recognizes, obviously gravity in the real world is a little bit different, till he recognizes that he's fallen down, he's fine. He continues running. It's only when he recognizes that he's falling down that something happens. So how many of you have learned quantum physics? Just a show of hands. Uh-oh, there's two in the room. Okay, so I'll pretend I learned some quantum physics. I have a son who's a physicist. He learned here in Monash. So he explained to me some quantum physics once. And he put it like this, or at least I put it like this. Imagine you have a teenager who needs to go to some kind of a party, Hanukkah party, right? So you got a teenager who needs to go to some kind of a Hanukkah party. And that teenager doesn't know what to wear. It's a female, by the way, just doesn't know what to wear. And they're staring at a closet full of clothing. And I'm like, I have nothing to wear. It's like full, like overflowing on the floor, on the ceiling, everywhere there's clothes, everywhere that I can see. And I'm like, I'm sitting there. So then the mother walks in, and the mother says, just take the brown blouse already and get going, right? And then, okay, they put on the brown blouse and off they go. All right, so in quantum physics, there's something called a superposition. A superposition, let me explain like this. There's something, we're going to run out of time, so I can't go too much into detail. All right, I'll go a few minutes over time. This is worth it. There's an experiment, a fascinating experiment called the double slit experiment. Has anybody heard of the double slit? Yeah, double slit? Okay. The double slit experiment is like this. You shoot an electron at a piece of metal. What do they make? It's metal. Card. Anything, right? A partition. You shoot an electron at a partition, and the partition has two slits in it, two little holes. On the other side, there's like an X-ray sheet. So as you shoot the electron through the slit, it'll hit the sheet at the back, and it will make a little mark. Make a mark. So which slit does it go through? If it goes through the slit on the right, the mark will be made on the back. The photographic paper will make it on the right. If you shoot it through the left, if it goes through the left, it'll be on the left. Okay. So far, it's not weird, is it? It doesn't sound weird, right? It's about to get really weird. Fasten your seatbelts. If you put a microscope, like a camera, facing the right slit, the electron will go through the right slit. If you then move the microscope to the left slit, the electron will go through the left slit. Depending on where you're observing it, where you're looking, that will force it to go into one or the other slit. Right? And not only that, if you put a camera on both slits, what do you think happens? It goes through both. You get two marks on the other side, right? Now this experiment has probably been done, I would say, thousands of times, probably more, several thousands of times for sure. And it's well established. It always does this, right? So the explanation is that light has properties of both waves and particles, which means that there's what quantum physics will call a superposition. So in other words, before you shoot the electron, it could go through either slit or both slits or neither. It has all those possibilities. That's called the superposition. At the superposition, anything is possible. Anything can happen. Then, when you shoot it and observe it go through one, it collapses the superposition into a single entity, into a single state. So, if the electron fires through a different slit depending on what you are observing, and that is at the quantum level, tiny, but it is the basis that makes up all of reality. So you're thinking, you're observing, the perspective that you have, whether it's positive or negative in the terms of what we've been discussing, can have a real influence on the physical nature of reality. So they're not so far away when they say, when the road runner like runs off the cliff, and until he acknowledges that and becomes conscious of it, he could be in a state of falling down or not. Schrodinger's cat, right? Could be in the case of falling down or not. It's in a superposition. And then when he looks down and he realizes what has happened, it collapses into that one single option and state, and he falls to the ground. Can you imagine the power of Trachgut Witzeingut, of everything that I've been saying? The positive thinking, the power of Trachgut Witzeingut, the ability to create your reality based on the thoughts, the machshava that you have in your head. So I'll conclude with this. And that is, I don't know if you've heard the saying, we're all in the same boat. Have you ever heard that saying? Sounds like a comforting saying, right? Sounds like comforting. Yeah, we're all in the same boat. That sounds right. Huh?
Depends where you are.
Depends if the boat's sinking, that's true. But it sounds like it's comforting, yeah. But it's false, obviously. It's patently false, right? We may all be in the same storm. That can happen. We can all be experiencing the same storm. But the same boat, that's not true. Some people have very sturdy boats. They have very sturdy ships. They're full of positive thinking. And so they can weather the storm, and the boat can take them through the storm and bring them to dry land on the other side. And when they come to dry land, they get off, they're safe, they go through life, they float through life as if they're on a pleasure cruise. Everything just goes great for them. Certainly their interpretation is that everything is going great. And then there's some people who are in rickety ships, rickety boats that are falling apart, and every wave is felt and batters them and pushes them over. And what I want to say, and what the P in peace system stands for, and this is what I'll leave you with, is that you get to decide the nature of your boat. The storm is not up to you. I wish it were. I wish we could calm the waters. I wish we didn't have to have storms. But the boat, the ship that you sail through those storms with, you make those yourself. That's what peace stands for. So I bless you all again, as I did yesterday, that you should sail through life in the most beautiful way, in the most secure ship, the USS Bitochen, I don't know. And you should sail through life. HMAS Bitochen. You should travel through the HMAS Bitochen through life, and that should protect you from what's happening outside, and inside should be calm, serene, beautiful, and blessed. Thank you very much.